Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to start right now. My name is Pylin Waddell. I'm the Vice President here at the FCCT. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our upcoming events before I begin the exciting event tonight. Tomorrow, if you thought that you knew everything about the national referendum that just happened, we will have yet another event about the national referendum that happened on Sunday, and we'll have three distinguished speakers who will break it down and analyze the results for you. Next Thursday, we have quiz night. This is becoming quite popular here at the FCCT, so please come. It's free for anyone, whether you're a member or not, to come and test your mettle against the foreign correspondents here or other members here at the FCCT. It's quite a fun night. Please do come to that. And then we also have the closing event for the exhibition that's up now. This year we've been emphasizing photographers and exhibitions that emphasize photographers that are actually residing in Bangkok. And we'll continue the Bangkok Photographer Series on our wall in support of our local photographers here. All right, tonight's event, can ASEAN be a global higher education destination? That is the question for tonight. We have three very distinguished speakers who will liven up the debate for us, I'm sure. Our first speaker is Ajahn Nantana Kochaseni. She is the AUN, or the ASEAN University Network Director, and has much experience with that organization, with the knowledge and the leadership she brings and gained through her previous post as the Deputy Executive Director of the AUN Secretariat, and the co-director of AUN EU University Network Program, or AUNP. She will be talking about, her talk will be focusing on policy. Then we also have Dr. James Gomez, who is the founder of the Asia Center at Bangkok University. He also comes with great experience in internationalizing universities and has been on many committees in charge of doing just that. Then finally, we have Mr. Wesley Teeter, who's a UNESCO senior consultant for the Asia and Pacific Regional Bureau for Education. And he consults with member states in ASEAN and throughout Asia and the Pacific on the Regional Convention on the Recognition of Qualifications in Higher Education. A bit of a mouthful there. But before we go to the speakers, I'd like to introduce you to our co-organizer tonight, who's from IIE. Jonathan Lembright has been an integral part in making tonight happen, and I'd like to defer to him for a few minutes so he can talk about why tonight's discussion matters. Jonathan?
Great. Thank you, Pylin. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to work with you and FCCT and on this event, an important event discussion that it is. Also, just want to note a thanks as well to my colleague, Jessica Lowe, who this is her idea many months ago to have this discussion and dialogue, and to the panelists. You guys are very busy, so Wes, Dr. Nantana, Dr. James, you guys taking time out of your schedule to do this is very much appreciated. So Pylin mentioned that I'm from IIE. I'm the regional director for IIE here in Bangkok, and we're a nonprofit. It's been around about 100 years, focusing on scholarship administration and educational training. And through our work over the many years we've been doing this, this particular topic is something that we have engaged with at various different levels. And to Pylin's question of why this topic matters, as I was thinking about this, to me it seems like this topic raises three broad key questions that I think are important for tonight, I think will probably be alluded to tonight, and I think as a whole host of other important key questions that will be raised by our panel of experts. But the first key question is regarding internationalization. And the question is this, is how will universities internationalize if they can't become a higher education destination. These issues are closely linked, and internationalization must be integral for any university hoping to remain relevant in the 21st century. So one, internationalization. The second large key or broad question this issue raises is one of ASEAN's status within Asia-Pacific region. So how will ASEAN keep pace with the fast growth and reputation of the larger Asia-Pacific higher education community? So will ASEAN lag behind within the region, or will they be seen as an equal partner within the higher education community in Asia-Pacific? And the last, I think, broader key question that this topic raises, and we were talking about this earlier over dinner, is just simply that of English language. So how will English proficiency impact this issue? For better or for worse, English is the language of internationalization, it's the language of global research and scholarship, and it's the official working language of the ASEAN community. But as you all know, proficiency varies widely within ASEAN, and we know that some countries within this region rank at the very bottom in terms of proficiency indexes. So this is an important topic for many reasons, but I think these are key topics regarding internationalization, ASEAN's role and status within the Asia-Pacific community, and then the role of English language. So I know there are many other questions our panel of experts will raise, but I think these are key, at least from my reflection on this. So with that, I just want to reiterate my thanks to FCCT for working with us on this event this night, and again, thanks to our panelists, and at this point, I'll turn it back over to Pailin. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Without further ado, I think we will begin with อาจารย์ Nantana ค่ะ
Thank you so much, Pailin, and it's my honor to be a part of this FCCT forum. And I will start with the facts. I will share what is going on, what kind of situation in the ASEAN related to the higher education. Please allow me to use the PowerPoint because I have quite a number of the information. So the question that I received from the email is highlight opportunity and challenges on the higher education development in ASEAN. So I will go quite quick for, as you know, that ASEAN have as all the ASEAN member states put the commitment that we will become one community. Under the ASEAN community comprised of the ASEAN political security community, ASEAN economic communities, as well as the ASEAN socio-cultural communities. And since after the 31st of December last year, AEC become one. It's already official launch as the ASEAN economic communities. Therefore, what is going on after that? I would like to share about the situation. This is the current situation that I already conducted the study through different documents. And according to the 10 member states, as you know, we can classify into 3 groups based on the economic status. For the low and low middle income country, that is one group, which is comprised Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. That is one group. For Vietnam, it's moved up to the lower middle income country. But for the second category is middle income country, comprise Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand. And for high income country, only 2 countries, Brunei and Singapore. That is the way that classified by the World Bank. And the current situation on the slide, I did the analysis. So for the low and low middle income country, the current situation is about the demand of enrollment in the higher education. More demand that go to the university. The treatment of the quality education, about the quality is a matter now. Less access on equity because become who have money, who have chance, and lack of resource support that is related to the disparities, and also limited the qualified staff, academic and staff in 4 countries. That is the fact because they already lack of the people, qualified people that work in the higher education, more opportunity for private higher education. Now there are a lot of investment from the private sector to invest to open up the private university. And in Cambodia, particularly in Cambodia, you can get the exact number of university in Cambodia because it's open and closed every day. It's like a mushroom ring. The Ministry of Education try to control the quality. If it not meet the standard, close it down, and then they change the name, open up again. So that is kind of the police and the thief chasing. So, and then another one is emphasis more on teaching more than research. That is the current situation in 4 countries. For middle income country, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, it still have the situation of high enrollment demand, except Thailand. As you know that Thailand approaching the aging society, number of students that enter to the university is less and less. And for other 3 countries, still high demand. Emphasis on education quality, that is emphasized on quality assurance. And less public expenditure. You can see that now those 4 countries try to change the status of university from the public support or public funding university to give, ministry will give the authority as the autonomous university in order to give the block grant or budget, and then the university have to survive by themselves. So that is the situation in the middle income country. And emphasize more on research-oriented policy in order to put up the internationalization profile. That is the trend. So there are the university in 4 countries looking for the international partner in order to have the research collaboration, in order to have the impact factor, and then the world ranking will push up, or even though the Asian ranking. And also emphasis more control and limit overseas campus, particularly in Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand. Only 1 country is Malaysia. Open up for the overseas campus in Malaysia without any consider as a competitor. That is the policy of ministry. For high income country, Brunei and Singapore, Brunei, they have a lot of resources. So therefore, they support all the higher education expenditure. So university have a lot of budget and more international academic collaborations. Now Brunei looking for the partner all over the world, not emphasize only from UK. They change the strategies on that part. For Singapore, as you know that the university in Singapore, NUS, NTU reached the top 30 world-class university. Therefore, they already have the internationalized profile very high. So they're looking for the partner, and they move for the research, advanced research. And the government itself opened up to welcome the overseas campus. So Singapore is very small, but there are 13 overseas campus from the university all around the world. So you can see that Singaporean government would like to set up Singapore as a higher education hub, the same as Malaysia, and even though Thailand also highlight this kind of policy. Let's see from the fact what kind of development is going on during last year. The ASEAN leader already signed on the ASEAN Vision 2025, and a part of that under the ASCC blueprint. ASCC is ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Blueprints 2025, already emphasized on 4 key factors: inclusive, sustainable, resilience, and dynamics. That are 4 key factors for the blueprint. And from that one, translate into the part of the education that called ASEAN 5-year work plan on education, 2016 to 2020. This is the second part, the second phase of the ASEAN 5-year work plan on education. And the end of last year, during the summit in Kuala Lumpur, the leader already signed Kuala Lumpur Declaration on Higher Education. So you see that the leader, ASEAN leader already emphasized the people to people connectivities, and also highlight the education as the driving force for the ASEAN community building. Let's see what is going on for the ASEAN 5-year work plan on education. There are 5 sub-goals and 8 sub-goals, but I will highlight only some of that. Like number 4, the government, all the ASEAN highlight and support the TVET. What is TVET? Technological vocational education and training become the priority under this education work plan. And I would like to highlight the 7 and 8, which is related directly. 6 also, the strengthen higher education sector through the quality assurance. And the sub-goal number 7, foster role of higher education through university industry partnership. So you see that 3 out of 8 emphasize on higher education. So let's jump to the Kuala Lumpur Declaration on Higher Education. That is the part that will lead you to see what is going to be the future of cooperation. Under the Kuala Lumpur Declaration, there are a core concept that is emphasized on quality education, highlight the quality assurance, intra-ASEAN mobility of the student and scholar. So the mobility become the priority. That is going to enhance the ASEAN awareness. And the third is about triple helix plus. What is triple helix plus? It's the cooperation through the university. You can see UGIC. In the past, we always mention about university industry partnership, right? But today, we need all stakeholders that get involved in higher education. They call triple helix. If you are the biologist, you know double helix, right? But this is triple helix. It's university, government, G is government, I is industry, and C is community. So this is a new idea that we have to engage all the stakeholders into the higher education process. And also keep the diversity of higher education for innovation-driven ASEAN community. Next one is contribute, foster sustainable local community development. So use SDG as the basic of the development. And the last, increase visibilities of ASEAN higher education. So it's related directly to internationalized profile. That is the idea under the Kuala Lumpur Declarations on higher educations. What is challenges? System, yes. Among 10 countries, higher education system still diverse. How we harmonize, that is the issue. Quality recognition, also the issue. Information dissemination, among 10 countries, we don't have exactly what kind of system, what kind of information that we can engage. So the financials, the last one, financial support. Each country have the limit in terms of the economics status, and therefore the resource support to the higher education also vary from country to country. There are some questions that if the government of Thailand provide the big budget like a Singaporean government provide to NUS and NTU, will Chulalongkorn University, my university, will reach the world ranking like NUS in 20 years? That is another question. I said, no. I said, no, not only money can change. You have to change the culture in the university, the mindset of the professor, the mindset of society that look at higher education. Not just you pay money, you get degree, right? Not that concept, right? So that's, I will go very fast. This is show you that from the first phase of the 5-year work plan on education, AUN serve on ASEAN, AUNQA, which is ASEAN University Network Quality Assurance System. That is only one system in the region that implement since 2007. And also ACTS is another system we call ASEAN Credit Transfer System that support the mobility of student exchange with the transfer of the credit or credit earning. And we are the part of ASEAN. I represent ASEAN University Network, and this is the project that we serve, more than 30 projects a year that serve the policy that I already mentioned. And we emphasize on three components: internationalization of the higher education, harmonization of higher education quality, as well as the youth and student mobility. That is the focus of the AUN. So, but I would like, give me 1 more minute, that for the mobility, we highlight 3E, which is not normal mobility. We emphasize the mobility for enhancing the ASEAN's awareness. So therefore, we think that the mobility should be enhanced or support the enhancement of student soft skill, as well as exposure of international experience. Otherwise, ASEAN students will not participate in the intra-ASEAN mobility. They look west. They would like to go anywhere outside the region. So how to bring them back to the region? That is the way that we think that we have to redesign the mobility programs. Okay, with the QA, quality assurance, with the mobility, and with the qualification framework that already endorsed by Ministry of Education. We have the ASEAN qualification framework now that all 10 countries will have to work towards this framework. So therefore, the mobility will happen. We can see that we can ensure the quality education. We expect the competency as program offer. We can promote student mobility and workforce mobility. That's all. Yeah. This is the profile of corporations. That's all.
Thank you, Ka.
Yes, thank you.
Ajahn.
Yeah. Yeah. ขอบคุณค่ะ
So there you have it, the facts
Sorry,
and figure.
take more time.
That's okay. I don't have a bell to ring tonight, so you got away with that. Thank you so much for the policy and facts and figures you presented. Now let's take a look at what's going on the ground. Professor James Gomez, how does it all work out? What is internationalization, and how is it working out on the ground for you?
Okay, thanks everyone. So my perspective is actually from a practitioner's perspective. You had the policy input, but how do you actually roll out internationalization on the ground? The first thing is, of course, we need to recognize higher education is highly politicized in the region. You know, it's a contestation between elites to try to control the direction of the university. It's also an issue of national pride. Depending on which elite sector captures higher education, you know, is also a question of national pride, ethnic pride, cultural pride as well. And also all this is happening in the context of questioning the value of the university as a center of learning or education. When anytime you step into a university right now, it's all about entrepreneurship and sending you off to industrial attachment. And therefore it questions whether the university is even relevant these days as an institution of higher learning. So in short, when I'm on the ground, when I'm employed by a university as an associate dean of internationalization, what do they really want? For me, I think most administrators, owners, whether the managers of the universities or the private sector owners of the university, the first thing they want to do through internationalization is to increase the brand value. So that's what they're after. They want to increase the brand value with the objective that the brand value will increase the financial viability of the university. And the heart of the financial viability of the university is really the students. So it's all about creating brand value and hoping your brand can attract students and therefore make you financially sustainable. Along the way, by the way, if it fits into a national strategy for higher education, okay, fine. Then we just align the speak towards such a policy. What do they actually do on the ground? When you talk about internationalization, it's always about, you know, receiving emails for cooperation, for signing MOUs. You will have, you know, non-stop visitation of delegation of academic staff and students. Your international office is running after organizing vans, activities. The real teachers and students actually do not meet all these people. It's the international office to the international office, and it always becomes a site visit. Then it's the organization of conferences and summer camps, you know, all geared towards, you know, growing the student market. How else do you create brand value? Accreditation is great. You know, the more accreditation I get, the more endorsements I have from international standards body, the better my brand value. That's what is in the job of the internationalization team every day. Universities who are always looking for opportunities to send students out from their home country to abroad. And that's simply to demonstrate to the parents back home, hey, look, if you send your kids here, they have a chance to go abroad and study. Therefore, you should send your kids here because we have a relationship overseas. In other cases, they want incoming students because they want to generate income. So summer camps, you know, credit transfer. At the end of the day, when I meet a colleague from a different university, it's like, show me the money. Right? Where's the money? I mean, you know, we don't do free exchanges. Come on, you know, let's be serious, right? I can't bring that back to the senior management. Diversity, yes, again, is about brand value. Asian universities, ASEAN universities, they want diversity, preferably staff from outside of Asia, so they can show it's attractive. Whether they can get such staff is difficult because of the tenure of contracts and the amount of salaries they are willing to pay to attract quality staff. Internationalization also is about rankings. You buy rankings, so you pay staff who are publishing so that you can get your index higher. I'm not sure whether it's a good game to play, especially if you're starting right at the bottom. If you are looking for a job in Singapore, the first question they will ask you is, what's your citation matrix? They want to know that first before they give you a time of day. So you are worth as good as your citation matrix, so go check, you know. The other special programs, Airlangga University in Indonesia has just launched a global talent program. So if any of you are interested, they'll pay you. I don't know whether it's good money, but they'll pay you money for short-term or long-term attachment as long as you sign everything off to the university. So again, you know, internationalization for ranking, but we don't know whether that's effective. Schools are also, you know, most of the schools in ASEAN and the Asian region do mostly teach in national languages, but then they translate their programs into English and then call them international programs. So that is also a problem because the curriculum then is not international. In many places, for those of us who know Thailand, right, international staff are traditionally found only in the language institutes of local universities, or they are interned at international colleges of universities. Very, very seldom do you actually find international staff in the main faculty of the universities. Then there are all the other variations, you know, double degrees, joint degrees, credit transfer. We talked about branch campuses, international campuses. One of the new things are university parks. For example, in China, I spent some time in China, south of China, you have a huge area which has like 4 or 5 universities. In China, it was pretty well done. Good infrastructure, food, student hostels, so on and so forth. In India, in a city like Calcutta, They also have educational zone, but it goes beyond universities. They also include think tanks and publishing houses. So that's quite an interesting approach. The latest one is in Malaysia, in Johor, in the area called Iskandar. It's called Edu City. They have a whole range of universities there. It's been up and running for a few years, but there are problems with infrastructure because it's a new development zone. There's not enough student hostels. There are not enough eateries. There are not enough, transport to connect the students and so on. So you have the buildings and the roads, but the infrastructure is not there. But these are ways in which, internationalization is taking place. But what is the problem? What is it I face on a day-to-day basis with colleagues? First, universities are embarking on internationalization without having national policies. So your national higher education policy is still nationalistic, right? It supports national pride, national interest, and national employment agendas or recruitment agendas, even though universities are trying to sell you as an international workforce. So there is a mismatch. Secondly, within the university itself, for example, where I work in Bangkok University, we have three key items that we flag: creativity, entrepreneurship, and internationalization. Now, this problem is not unique to Bangkok University. It's also something I experienced in Malaysia. But they do not have an internationalization policy that guides all the different sections of the university. So when you go to a research department or you go to a curriculum department, it's still very much on a national basis. So the universities actually do not articulate and internationalization policies that covers all sectors of the university. So many countries in in ASEAN have a problem. Standard problems with MOUs. You sign MOUs, but they are not they are mostly inactive. Salaries. International staff always complain that the salaries are low in the ASEAN region, except for Singapore. Malaysia is slowly catching up, especially at the international branch campuses of overseas universities. Local staff complain about the salary gap. Many of the universities, such as like Malaysia or Thailand, it is a disjuncture because you have to factor in the elites who occupy teaching positions. They get parachuted in. They own cars, they own condos, but they also draw a 30,000 or 40,000 baht salary. But then they will also expect international staff to live on a wage of 40,000, who may not have the condo already paid up, or the car or the servant and so on. So there is that elite disjuncture. You will see that also very specifically in Malaysia. Research and publication grants are sometimes only awarded to the locals. Like for example, in Malaysia, only the locals can apply for research grants. So international staff don't have access. So it defeats the purpose of hiring such staff to publish in higher tier education when they don't have access to grants or other kinds of support. And more importantly, such national grant institutions have a national focus. So if you have international scholars who are looking at stuff regionally or internationally, then the bid becomes difficult. So, and then integration of staff. Staff are not integrated in the main decision-making bodies of universities simply because language is used as a barrier or an excuse not to appoint a qualified professional staff to leadership position. So the kind of you recruit international staff and then they can't perform because either from research or leadership they are handicapped. So across the region you have challenges like that. The truth of the matter is international students, and we got a flavor of it, are not interested in Southeast Asia, right? If they come to the region, to a place like to Singapore, it's simply because Singapore gives you money, scholarships. That's why you come. You come to Thailand because it's cheap, or the entry barrier is low, right? Or you got a Thai studies scholarship to come to study in Thailand. So the whole student mobility to some extent is largely scholarship driven, and if you remove that, there's no genuine mobility. I can go on, but in a nutshell, I want to say that language is very important. I think to simply translate existing program to international language is difficult. And if your students are studying international language and then you send them abroad for mobility programs in English, they can't perform. So many times they're sitting down and nothing is getting in because there's a language gap. So, and also the integration of staff because of the language gap. So whether it's in Indonesia or Thailand or even in China, it's a problem. So this is what we face on a day-to-day basis when we have to roll out those policies of internationalization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor James. Next, we have Mr. Wesley, who, as a consultant, will tell us what the challenges are.
Well, I think I get to pick up right where James left off. I think I can take my UNESCO hat off. And start with young people today are the most connected, the most open-minded, right, in history. I saw this on the train today. Everyone was playing Pokemon Go. So we're all connected. What is the problem, right? You have more access, more internet access, AirAsia alone, the last 15 years, you think about the development of airlines and the connections that we all share. What is the problem? And I mean that from your perspective, because in the last 20 years or so, I think maybe 1997 feels distant by now. Economic growth, pretty substantial over the last 2 decades throughout East Asia. But I think the one thing I want to make before we go into a discussion with you, and again, taking from these 2 points so far, is that I think we don't have a constructive way to talk about problems. We don't actually have a feedback loop, a way to ask what is the problem. James is exceptionally rare in this dialogue, and Dr. Nantana as well from this high-level view. But together we start to see this idea of how many conferences, how many qualifications frameworks, quality assurance, technical terms that have no meaning to you as stakeholders. How many of you care about qualifications frameworks? One. And Dr. Nantana and myself. Yes. If I asked James that question, he'd be like, can you explain how that's going to get me some students? So 3 of us care, and I think that's the problem. It's like, what is important to you? And I think that's considering that you are the main stakeholders in international higher education, and how can we engage you further? I meet colleagues in New Zealand when I ask that question, what's the problem and how do we get them involved in qualifications frameworks? And they say, well, the hairdressers love it. The hairdressers can compare across states. There has to be a bigger problem, there has to be a real problem, and we have to be able to talk about that problem to motivate people to get involved. It's an unusual approach for us, I think, in the region. We don't talk about problems. And I think if we really understand it from diverse perspectives, and not just from an Australian perspective or a European perspective, then ASEAN is going to create its own change space. And I think that's what has to happen. We have to start to identify a space for change that is our own, and it is not based on what the European Union has passed on to us through their own vision of internationalization, which I hope in the discussion we can come back to a little bit more, the implications of international donors. So together, we can identify problems that I think you care about, and that's what I hope we can do in this discussion, is that not for me to introduce yet another recognition convention or qualifications framework, and there are many we can go into. It gets exceptionally detailed. But I think what I want to propose is that there's a framework coming out of South Africa. Matt Andrews talks about 3 things. He says, first, we need to think about good problems that we can work on, that we actually care about and are motivated by, why they're important. And he says the way to do that is to start with this authority. Where are you in your career, and what do you have authority over in terms of the problem you want to address. What is your authority? UNESCO has a certain scope and a certain mandate to address a core problem, right? Another circle is the acceptance. What is the issue that people are motivated by? What is the issue within my framework that I could mobilize resources to address, right? That's the second one. And the third overlaps, it's called ability. And the ability is, maybe I have the idea, maybe I have the acceptance, but if I don't have the resources and a way to mobilize and create that change, then we shouldn't be, that's not a good problem. That's not something we can really get things done, accomplish on. So change space is really about the authority that you represent, the acceptance on the issues you actually care about, not qualifications frameworks, quality assurance, or technical terms of international higher education, but what is it from your perspective that you care about, right? And then the ability. And if we can grow that space, if we can create a change space for ASEAN, I think we can start to have a more productive dialogue, first starting with what is the problem, why is it important, who are the key stakeholders, and then how do we start to come together to address those problems so that it doesn't feel like we're talking on a different planet when we try to think about the word education and what that means for the future. And that's really what the Sustainable Development Agenda is about, quality education, a very simple idea, quality education. And I think that's something we need to talk about. What is the problem, and then how can quality education be a part of that development process?
Great, short and sweet. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to open the floor up for questions. There's a mic in the back. Please don't be shy. The rules of the house is that when you're at the mic, please tell us who you are, if you're a member here, or just your name and what you do. If it's relevant. And we stick to questions here and not statements. So, you know, if you have an opinion, I'm sure the panelists will be here afterwards to hear you out. But for now, we reserve the mic for questions. I will start with one for the panelists. So we talked about the EU's influence in this internationalization in ASEAN, their perspective on things. Can you talk a little bit about how the EU looks at this and their influence, and then that versus China's maybe influence in this equation?
Would you like to go first, Dr. Dantana?
Yes, from the long experience with the
Right.
corporations, my cooperation with the EU partner, since 2003 that I joined the AUN, and I work as the ASEAN directors, and that project is supported by the EU. It's try to bring the university in EU to get close and have the collaborative research and cooperations for 6 years. That is 6-year project. It's very successful. I can say that because of it's opened the door for the European partner to see the ASEAN. So therefore, from that project, it's kick off for the second phase of the cooperation called Asia Link. You might heard about Asia Link, which is a mega project. And after Asia Link, it's kick off for Erasmus Mundus program. That is it's have the originally from the ANP program as a prototype and then transform it to the new initiative. But the principle is the same, bring them together. But for Erasmus Mundus now, it's not only the university in Europe, now it's open to all, Europe and Asia, Europe and South America and other become the partner. Multilateral cooperation exists now and is very proactive now. From the influence of EU to the ASEAN, I can say that now we have another big project called EU Share to support the higher education in ASEAN. And because of it's a European budget, therefore the consortium is from Europe and work with the ASEAN partner. But the way they try to share, that is the way to share the experience in Europe through different issues. For example, to the Bologna process, to the QA in EU, QF qualification framework in EU, and also the mobility through the Erasmus Mundus program with us, with the ASEAN. But the way that we share and learn is not the equal partner. That I can say frankly is not equal partner. It's still, from my perspective, ASEAN still like a recipient. European is become the donor, some kind of that. No such the feeling of the equal partner through that kind of cooperation is still have there. Yeah, that is the one thing that I feel from 13 years of experience through different kind of international corporations. And maybe Leslie can talk about the EU project or EU share project.
It's a great ending point because I think that frustration, that sense of great, you have experience, but feeling of unequal, I mean, I think that has to change. So this is a 10 million euro project, and I know of others. So roughly in this space, just in international higher education, there's easily $25 million out there that are running these projects coming from international agencies. The EU in particular, I just want to read the title of this policy brief from May 2016. And by the way, I'm a trainee of the European Commission in 2004. I know the European Commission. I love it. It is one of the great institutions, and there's a lot of potential, so they do good work. But I'm also critical in terms of the role in capacity building for higher education, and I want to bring that critical perspective to our development work. So the title of this policy brief, are you ready? Towards greater harmonization of higher education in ASEAN, policy recommendations from the first and second shared policy dialogues. And then at the bottom you have 6 EU or 6 national agencies of logos. So there's not an ASEAN partner listed on the bottom, right?
In fact, AUN worked closely.
Yes, AUN was there. I was there contributing to this project because I believe in it. And I happen to know each of these individuals behind it, and they are good people. I mean, maybe a German, Vietnamese speaker. I mean, these are people that know ASEAN extremely well. But the nature of the funds have this presentation that I think gives you the impression of an unbalanced relationship, and it can feel like a steamroller. And I think it doesn't reflect the problem.
And is China treating you any better?
Well, I think the Chinese, compared to Thailand, allow for international campuses. There are quite a range of international campuses in China. I worked in China. But there are challenges. One of the things is the access to information. So I was working in Zhuhai, in Guangzhou province, right at the south next to Macau and Hong Kong. And it was a joint venture between Beijing Shita. Beishita is a Beijing Normal University and Hong Kong Baptist University. So they had to negotiate internet access. So only on campus you could have access to Google, for example. So that was helpful. We could use Google Documents and all the Google Drive facilities. But the minute you left campus and out of the university network, then you had to deal with the Great Firewall. Colleagues who, we had a Department of Government, Communication, colleagues, international colleagues who were bringing books over from Macau, had their bags checked and most of their books removed, especially English language book when the custom officers couldn't understand. But they had other policies in place. For example, it was an English language university. There was close policing of the staff to ensure they all spoke in English. And you had student evaluation also making sure you spoke in English. On the flip side, China also gives out a lot of scholarship. I recently returned from East Timor, and you could see the range of Chinese investments in bricks and mortar, roads, even small businesses. But what was interesting is I had a conversation with a few young Timorese students who were on break from China, and they all got full scholarships, and they could converse in Putonghua with me, and they were doing engineering degrees. So I think there's a lot of uptake of Chinese money as well. And I think as long as you take money from somebody, I think the relationship will always be unequal. So no different from the Chinese and the rise of Confucius institutes in the region as well.
Thank you. Do we have a question at all? Wow. Okay. Yes, please. Oh, good. 2 questions. Yes? Great.
My name's is on.
Yep, yeah, we can hear you.
My name's Nigel Gould Davis. I teach at Mahadon University. And first, my thanks for arranging this really fascinating, very rich discussion this evening. We've heard, I think, complementary viewpoints so far. It's been really very, very interesting coverage of the views. 2 questions, if I may. Firstly, it's clear there's a distinction to be made between internationalization and ASEANization. We can call it that on the other hand. The case for internationalization is very clear, I think, and James expressed it very eloquently. I just wanted to understand more thoroughly what the rationale for an ASEAN-wide harmonization is, given that the range of countries and education systems is really so diverse. And I think the first slide that you put up there with the ranking of the different income levels sets it out very clearly. I want to believe, I just wanted to understand better what the ultimate goal or outcome of an ASEAN harmonization process is. Secondly, back to internationalization, perhaps particularly to James, what would you say are the success stories so far, the practical cases and examples, outside of Singapore, which is always different anyway, that other education institutions aspiring to internationalization can look at? Thank you.
There you have it. First question is, what is the rationale behind ASEAN harmonization? Ajanka.
Yes, maybe we learn from European friends, because in Europe there are also diverse systems until they come up with the Bologna process in order to try to harmonize the system of the higher education that can be compatible among the member country. So that is the concept that but for ASEAN, we don't use the standardization. We don't feel positive with the standardization. So therefore, we use the word harmonization, try to harmonize the diversity that already exists in 10 ASEAN countries. So therefore, the indicator or the mechanism that can ensure the harmonization is quality assurance. It needs a quality assurance system to benchmark at least the minimum. This is the minimum, like a minimum standard. Each 10 countries, they have the quality assurance system at national level. But at each country, the bar is different, the minimum bar. Therefore, AUN come up with regional system that try to enhance, to ensure the quality of higher education at the regional expectations. So now we already implemented for several years, since 2007. We start with the program assessment. The leaflet that I circulate, that is about the quality assurance. And now we move to the institutional assessment in order to ensure the quality of university in terms of policy, in terms of strategies, in terms of functional in the university. That is the way. We believe that if the university has the QA in place, and we hope that QA culture will exist among the stakeholder. When we talk about stakeholder, it's not just professor, not university staff, not the manager, but including student, alumni, employer, that are all the stakeholder of the higher education. Therefore now, the priority in higher education in ASEAN is quality. All the government, all the ministry already consider the priority is quality. How to push up the quality, that is another issue. Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
Gajan. The second question was to you, Professor James. Some good examples.
Yeah. So thanks for the question. Yeah. For me, I guess how I would assess, well, at least closeness to success. I mean, there's no definitive end. I think it's always work in progress. I think is when you find institutions that are less politicized, and when you get into the institution as a staff or a student, you do have freedom from fear, because I think there is a general reluctance within universities in ASEAN to appoint foreign staff, and especially if it affects sort of politics or academic freedom and things like that. On that note, I think leaving Singapore aside, one good example would be Malaysia. But in Malaysia, I think we will have to look at the private universities as well as possibly the international branch campuses. I think over in these places, I think they try at least to work towards four key elements of internationalization, which is the development of an international curriculum where students actually graduate and are able to work internationally. International research, collaboration, and international type of project, not national research projects. International staff with there's no pay discrepancy between local staff and foreign staff. It's one scale, but people are paid decent wages, and a good mix of students. Now in the Malaysian case, because of geography, because of religion, and because of political connection, you get a lot of students from the Middle East and African countries, and a lot from Indonesia. So especially the Indonesians feel very comfortable, and with several of the international campuses, you have found the volume of Indonesian students and from the Middle East is quite high. Close by to our region, I think Australia is a good example. I mean, I always tell my students from China, but in Australia, you have freedom from fear in terms of academic topics. Hong Kong is also good. It also meets up with these standards, but because of the proximity to China, I think the student diversity is still within Greater China. Hong Kong students, you have a few students from Southeast Asian region, but not much, because Hong Kong is very different from Singapore, because the volume of scholarships is very, very little. Because part of the internationalization game at Singapore is not only to pay high wages to attract staff, but they also give out generous amounts of scholarship to diversify the student mix, so that's why I always counsel foreign students, because they always get devastated when they apply for scholarship to NUS and they can't get it, So it to some extent it's artificially created with lots of money. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor James. Next question, please.
Good evening. My name is Willard Van de Bogart, and I'm a teacher and researcher at Bangkok University, and have been teaching in Thailand 15 years. We just came from a annual meeting where the branding, as James talked about, was mentioned, but one other thing was talked about, and that was there's going to be an initiative within the university that there will be blended learning. And the question, it's a interesting question, I think, is I'm student-centric, and I am with the students all the time. We heard the Pokemon all connected in the world. I was watching on the bus the other day, first time I saw it. But the thing that isn't being addressed is there is no indication of what digital learning is all about, what digital pedagogy is all about, and how the curriculum committees can filter down into the staff how to educate the teachers to implement digital pedagogy that the students are using daily. With tablet computers, we have smart classrooms. But the biggest problem is that there is no way, there's no instructional way that any teacher is being given the guidance based on the research that's being done throughout all of Australia, throughout all of New Zealand, throughout all of Ireland. In Australia, every teacher must pass a certificate in order to run a digital classroom. We have nothing like that in Thailand. We do not have an instrument that we can give to the teacher to show them how the digital technologies can be integrated with pedagogical methodologies to help the student learn with his technology. Question, how do we implement digital pedagogy learning methodologies for the students within these policy structures?
Who would like to take? Go ahead, Ka.
Please allow me to respond to these questions. If you see the policy of the ASEAN, they already emphasize to utilize ICT for education. That is the policy in place. It's gonna take a time sometimes for each government or each ministry of education to take up the leading role into translate policy into the practice or into the actions. So you can see that for example, I work with 30 universities in ASEAN. They are all the top university. It's still difference. If you start with the Singapore, NUS, NTU put the clear policy that 80% of the class will be on e-learning. So they call blended mode learning. So it means that all the professors have to develop the e-course for students to do the self-learning. And a part is just the tutorial and the discussion. So that is policy in place, and implementation and resource already support all the professors. But if you talk about CM, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, impossible. They lack of resources. But then realize that the ICT is a very important tool for the pedagogy, the blended mode teaching. So therefore, from my experience, now I work with the Ministry of Education Korea on the project called ASEAN Cyber University. So therefore, the government of Korea already support the assistance to CLMV country in order to upgrade the ICT infrastructure and train them to know how to develop the e-course, how to run the e-material, and train the teacher, the professor, to know how to conduct the e-courses. So that is a starting process. So from country to country, we are in different level of developments in terms of e-learning. But this is the trend, this is the future, this is the frontier of the higher education, that all universities realize this is the way that we must go for. And students learn faster than professor. So that is gonna be the way how to change the mindset of the professor to accept the new technology, learning but with the student. Sometimes I have to learn with the students, right? So that is the way it's going on. So the concept of lifelong learning is important. How we train the student, even though ourselves, to ready to learn. Every single minute we have to learn. Like a Pokemon Go. That is a very new for me too. I just learned a couple of days ago how to play it. Just look at my daughter. So that is the things, yes. Right? We learn every day, learning by doing.
That's right.
So even though to be the professor, we cannot stop learning, right, James? Yes,
Anyone else have something to add?
Well, I guess from where I sit at the university, it's really whether they have the budget to put aside for staff development, and especially in private universities. So one of the challenges is always budget. I mean, we run very lean outfits, so we may not have that kind of money as public universities, and we don't have grants. So sorry, you're on your own.
Yeah. We're editing a book right now on blended learning, and another on MOOCs, and another on how faculty get hired and promoted. And all of that ties into, I think, this very good question, which is the role of quality teaching. And I think we don't really value that enough. We might think that it's okay to just lecture for 3 hours. It's not. It's not okay to lecture for 3 hours. We know better than that. Whether it's live or online, you can teach badly, and we allow bad teaching to happen. And we allow it through our hiring practices, and we allow it because of ranking systems. We allow it because of, like the citation index problem that James brought up. So unless you value quality education, and I didn't know this to be true. I used to think that, just more technology would push through this problem. It won't push through the problem. If we don't think that quality teaching is literally the heart of higher education, we're not going to move that needle. And unfortunately, we care a lot more about international research, and that's where a lot of funding is going and pushing rankings, than we do about quality teaching. And so I would argue that it's not really about digital pedagogy. I think that's a specific mode of learning that we need people to focus on. But quality teaching is an even broader problem that we have not put into our faculty hiring and promotion strategies.
There you go. Next question, please.
Hello, my name is Adam Thompson. I'm the Assistant President for Academic Affairs at Stanford International University here in Thailand. First, I'd like to just respond to a comment that James made. I do think that Thailand can be a destination for international students. We have students coming from 112 countries today, and it makes up about 40% of our body, and we do that without giving very many scholarships at all. So I think that Thailand and several other countries in ASEAN can be destinations that are reasonably priced for education, especially since American students, especially in our bachelor degree programs, are within our top 5 nationalities represented on campus, and Western education is becoming more and more expensive. But I would like to ask a question about the Thai market in particular. Today there are 1.8 million university students in Thailand. 3% of them, that's 60,000 students, are studying in English medium-based instruction programs. Commonly we call them international programs. However, in that number of 3% has been pretty steady over the last few years. However, there's been big growth in the number of Thai students studying in English and bilingual high school education programs. But that is not translating into a large growth in the international program market for universities. And I would like to know why you think that is, and what you think universities in Thailand need to do to get more Thais to join international programs in Thailand. Thank you.
Who would like to take that one? Don is reaching for a mic.
Yeah, may I take the first microphone? Yeah. There are many factors. Yes, I agree with you. The number of the Thai students in the international program is quite stagnant, quite sometimes, and it's related to the even though we have a big number of the students in the international school, but the top of the group always go abroad, and the second tier, third tier, no choice, stay here in Thailand. That is the fact that we have to accept, right? But it's still good, right? For example, I'm from Chulalongkorn University. For the business school, a BBA, 150 students per batch. I can say that around 70% are Thai, 30% are foreigner, which is very small. The program itself try to do the promotion, roadshow, PR, many way, but we still struggle because a top student go abroad. They're looking for the elite university all over the world, And if they are good, they can get the scholarship, right? But if they cannot go abroad, they study in Thailand under the family support, because mostly they are come from the quite well-off family. So that is the factor that we have to accept. And another, everyone agree with me that quality of the university, quality of the program is become a priority for the parent, for the family to support. Or why don't you apply to this university? Why don't you apply to this university due to the ranking, even though national ranking or whatever, and the recognition, social recognitions, that is another factors. So that is the issue. And Thailand would like to be the higher education hub. So we target the neighboring country, students from neighboring country. And I always keep talking and tell that the good students always have the many choice. Even though from Myanmar, particularly from Myanmar, you know that a lot of assistants go to Myanmar after they open the country. A lot of scholarship flowing there, and all the good students go abroad, everywhere in the world. And the second tier maybe go to Thailand, but it is better they go to Singapore, to Malaysia, and then the Thailand will third priority. So you see that is the choice of the student.
Anyone else has something to add?
Yeah. I can add a pricing challenge. An undergraduate program, an international program, you know, is priced between about 450,000 baht to over 1.2 million, depending on which school you go to. And these days, you know, if you start an international program, you got to at least price it around 700,000 baht, which is really, you know, even if you look at the region, is the price that you would pay equivalent to study at Monash in Malaysia, for example. So that's the kind of discrepancy. And the other thing is, the international programs in local universities, the teaching staff is still not diverse enough. So if they are paying that kind of price range between 450 to 1.2 million, and the median price is around 700,000 to 800,000, the students want some kind of, you know, staffing diversity or learning experience that may include also perhaps, you know, exchange with a university. So if the programs are unable to provide that, then obviously the pattern of going abroad directly happens. So these are some of the challenges we face from an operational and pricing point of view.
Great. Next question, please.
Good evening. My name is Tony Middleton. I'm an FCCT member here. I'm not an academic. I'm an airline consultant, and I did some work last year in Myanmar. So some of the comments that Dr. Nantana has made has really prompted my question. I retain connections there, and in fact I'm doing some work with people who are looking at setting up higher education, private higher education institutions up there. As we all know, Myanmar is a country that has got massive challenges even with the new government, and there's a lot of things even just down to settling the issues between the various factions and the war zones that are going on there. What I see is that exactly what you mentioned, the reasonably wealthy students are going overseas for their education. When they come back, rather than being welcomed and being used and recognised for their overseas experience, there's quite a lot of prejudice against them because they're viewed as being spoilt little rich kids who have come from their fathers being the generals in the old regime many times. Then there's the next level where there's a thirst for knowledge and for education. The next level of students who don't have the funding or the ability to travel overseas. And they're the ones that my associates are trying to tap into, not to make a very profitable university or a higher education thing, but to try to give these kids the chance to extend their education. That's the background. what I see as the difficulty, and I'm very interested in what else is happening in the region as I get closer to this, is there are funds going into Myanmar, but of course when they go in it's very difficult to find out where they're going. And I'd be particularly interested, really on behalf of my associates up there, is whether there are any core universities in the ASEAN region who are actively working in Myanmar to assist, provide academic, technical and financial support there, because it's very difficult to find it out sitting as I do in Bangkok, even though I'm working in other industries in ASEAN, and I think I've got good connections. It's very difficult to find out where it's going and who the right people may be to talk to in Singapore or in Bangkok to provide the introductions to that level of support. And I guess that's the question. What I do recognise is the government is underfunded generally, and they've got massive drains with the lady trying to hold 4 or 5 portfolios, I'm not sure how many there are, and trying to balance the budget and the books in a country that's really at the very low end of the socio-economic scale. I'd be very interested in your comments.
Thank you for the questions. Yes, among the member university under the AUN, we help the university in Myanmar in different way. Some university provide a scholarship. Some university bring the professor there as a visiting professor to help to run the programs. And not only in ASEAN, particularly in university from Japan. Many university from Japan already go there to build the collaborations with the local university, help them to redesign the curriculum. That is kind of things. And some universities send the team of professor there to help the local university to run the program in order to uplift the quality. That is the many kind of cooperation is already flow to the Myanmar. And also as I mentioned, the scholarship, a lot of scholarship offered to a student from Myanmar. From government itself, from the international donor, from NGO, that is many kind of the support flow there. But there are a lot of needs, as you imagine. The country already closed for almost half a decade. And everything is stagnant. No development, no improvement. Can you imagine that University of Yangon is top university in Myanmar? It's like a secondary school in the remote area in Thailand. Can you imagine? So need a lot of resources to help them to upgrade the quality, not only the human resource or staff developments, but infrastructure, particularly in the scientific program, engineering program. It needs a lot of instrument, a lot of equipment. It's going to take time, but it's along the way. And many dialogue partners realize this is important to go there to help them. So China there, Korean there, Japanese, European also there.
Right.
So you can see a lot of foreigner in Yangon. The life in Yangon is so expensive. I don't know how local people survive. Yes. And the because of the university now, the country already reformed the higher education. Previously, the university is like a specialized university. For example, the Ministry of Transport have the Myanmar Maritime University. You see that university belong to different ministry. Just recently, they integrate in under one ministry, which is Ministry of Education. So it's in the process of reform. It's going to take time. And the tuition fee that local students pay, $10 for a semester. Can you imagine $10 per one student? How university can survive? So it takes time. I do hope that with the new government and with the new policy can drive the country faster, less bureaucratic. That is my dream to see Myanmar. And AUN also help the Myanmar government to bring the grant from the Asian Development Bank to help university to establish the quality assurance unit, put QA in place. So therefore, that is a kind of contribution from different agencies, including AUN. Yes, thank you.
Anyone else have anything to add? Yeah?
I would just say quickly that COMET, Connecting the Mekong, is a USAID project. That's the other 20 million. The half of the 20 million is about 12. So it's the EU big project, and then COMET is the other big one, and that's particularly focused on the lower Mekong. So in terms of the events that they put on, the funding opportunities, and the network that they're producing to kind of build up the capacity of higher education and training, I think these kind of projects are good networking opportunities. It may not be able to tap into funds directly, but these are organizing important partners. And same with United Board. If you have an interest in Christian higher education, then the United Board is also giving grants, and they have a lot of meetings that are open, and they're just open to collaboration in that sense. And bring I think those conferences and these projects that organize groups can be a good way to tap into the development context.
Let's go to our last question for the night.
Hi, Marwan Mark of the Nikkei Asian Review. Just two questions. As educationists, you've expressed concern about the sector you're working in, but none of you have reflected the concerns of the students or their parents if, as you say, the situation is somewhat dire. What are you hearing from that perspective? That's my first question. And the other problem in Thailand, as those of you who are familiar with the Thai education system know, is that there is a no-fail policy. Everybody gets through at some point. So how does you reconcile that with the standards of international universities that places probably a bar where some students will have to fail if they don't get the grades? Thanks.
I think that no fail in the school, yes, but not in university. I insist that in university, student can fail, can get the grade of F, which is fail. That is already practiced in all universities in Thailand, but not in school. I agree with you. That is the big problems. Hopefully that with this government can reform the policy of the basic education. Yes.
Anybody want to tackle the first question about the perspective of parents and students?
Yeah, I think for me, I think we need to question higher education and universities in general. The truth of the matter is most of the time once the student is enrolled, the student is in despair because the student questions the quality of instruction, questions the capacity of the instructor because knowledge moves so fast, you know, and questions the value of the institutions and so on. But they are caught in the rut of certification. So they said, okay, I'll just sit it out, I'll come to class, I'll be quiet, I'll get my attendance, and that's what it all matters. Students ultimately are on checking off their attendance. Now, then they are willing to part with money either to go abroad or undertake other type of study experiences that are being provided by service providers, whether in country or abroad. So students can easily spend $1,000, a bit more, to travel around the region, or much more to go cross continents to study. So I don't know whether hopping on the traditional university structure is the way to go. I think it's going to change very, very drastically moving forward. So the whole destruction of this higher education we need to consider. Parents are not interested in the certificate so much as to whether their kids will get jobs.
Right.
So students now have to sell to the parents that if you send your kids to us, we almost guarantee a job. So I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I returned from Bangladesh at a quality assurance meeting, and I had a chance to interact with some of the senior people in UGC as well as different university. It has come to a point that one of the largest private university in Bangladesh has to buy businesses to demonstrate to their parents, hey, here is the industry experience. Hey, this is where they're going to get jobs. So you need to sell jobs to parents. Therefore, you know, the no-fail policy is fine because, you know, whether you pass or fail, and of course everybody pays to pass, and the universities, you know, the truth of the matter is they ensure you pass because the failure, the capacity for the lecturer to fail the students is not there. Even if you fail, you know, your administrator, line manager, and the higher-ups will fix it for you. So therefore, jobs matter rather than certification. So if you go to the ground, you know, and I will not embarrass some of my colleagues to share what happens in the administrative program, but these are the facts. These are the facts. So I think it's about jobs and it's about skills. The university is an entity that we have inherited. We have to put up with it, you know. Let's see what happens next.
And just to clarify, the Bangladesh University is buying businesses so that their students can have jobs in those businesses?
Yeah, I think maybe I might be stretching that so much, but definitely for entrepreneurial experience. You know, whether it's a cafe, it's a shop, and so on, because you need to, I mean, you're a private university, you got to show, you know, you got access. You know, I mean, you can't sell education if you're unable to place your students for industry experience. Right? Parents want to have the buy-in, you know, they want to be confident, and they want to know that they can get a job. They don't want to end up, you know, going through their networks and friends and say, hey, you know, my kid has just come back, and fix them a job. Especially if they cannot perform. So that's, to me, you know, on the ground, dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, that's what parents want. They want jobs for their kids.
Fascinating. Is there more to add?
Yeah, if I can, I would just say that this reminds me of why it's so incredible to work in this fantastically complex region and world, and particularly think about not just ASEAN, but Asia Pacific, so with the 46 member states. So students are under tremendous pressure, and universities are not going to be able to deliver alone. So what governments are doing is trying to create flexible learning pathways. So next week I'll be in Sydney. 35 member states are coming together, and they don't know the answer to the question of how do we put students first and deal with this, sit through the grading problem, sit through lectures. And so what they're trying to do is diversify learning pathways so that there are different types of formal, non-formal, and informal learning. And students will have to do more in this context until universities can adapt in this environment. Credentials still matter, but learning is the most important.
Great. Good note to end on. Thank you so much for our three very distinguished panelists. I think this has been a fascinating discussion and really actually quite good quality questions tonight that I really enjoyed. So thank you from the audience as well for your questions tonight. And thank you for coming and listening to this panel. As always, we put up panels that we think benefit our members. And if you're not yet a member, I highly recommend that you pick up our application form at the door and sign up. Thank you very much and have a good night.
You know, I need parents everything. Parents always
I know.
Maybe private
So
university.
that is the way how we train. What should they do?
Yes, this is
Overprotection.